A waitress helped a black old man every morning, until 4 bodyguards and his lawyers showed up. A cold wind pressed against the windows of Highway 9 Diner, rattling them like an old memory. The neon sign outside buzzed faintly, open 24 hours, though everyone in town knew it only stayed open because Grace Miller did. She moved like she had learned balance on broken glass. Graceful, careful, quiet. 26, tired but still smiling. She poured coffee that tasted like smoke and hope, depending on who you asked. The regulars came for routine. Grace came for survival. The bell above the door jingled at exactly 6:07 a.m. every morning. Same sound, same man. He was tall, dark-skinned, shoulders straight despite his age. His beard was pepper gray, his hands large but steady, the kind that once carried weight no one else could see. His coat, long and brown, looked expensive once, now just loyal. He always sat in booth 3, always by the window, always ordered black coffee, dry toast. Never more, never less. "Morning, Mr. Brooks," Grace said, sliding a cup toward him. "Morning, Miss Grace," he replied, voice deep and calm like a hymn left unfinished. For weeks, that was it. 2 sentences, exchanged daily. But there was something about the man that drew silence toward him. Not emptiness, presence. Grace had seen loneliness before. She'd grown up in foster homes, learned early how to build walls inside her chest. But Elijah Brooks didn't wear loneliness like most people did. He wore it like discipline. The first time she smiled at him, he nodded once. The second time, he smiled back. By the third, she caught him watching the sunrise through the fogged window, whispering something under his breath, a prayer or a memory. And from that morning on, she started refilling his cup without charging him. Grace lived in a small apartment above the laundromat, slept next to a heater that coughed more than it worked. Her dreams were simple: pay rent, maybe save enough to buy a secondhand car. But every morning, she found herself waiting for 6:07 a.m. Mr. Brooks had become her calm in a world that never stopped spinning. He told her small stories about old jazz clubs in Chicago, about the sound of rain on tin roofs, about how quiet used to mean peace, not poverty. Grace listened. She didn't know why it mattered, but it did. Then one morning, she noticed his hands shaking slightly as he reached for his cup. "You all right, Mr. Brooks?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "Getting old, Grace. The body forgets what the heart remembers." That day, he left behind a folded newspaper clipping under his saucer. Grace unfolded it. Civil rights attorney Elijah Brooks, defender of the unheard. The photo was him, younger, in a courtroom, fire in his eyes. Grace blinked hard. He wasn't just another old man. A week later, Mr. Brooks didn't come. She brushed it off. Maybe weather, maybe rest. But by the second day, her chest grew tight. By the third, she called the only hospital nearby. No Elijah Brooks. By the fourth morning, she sat alone in booth 3, staring at his usual place. The coffee in front of her went cold before her hope did. When she left that night, she whispered, "Be safe, old man," to the empty diner. Days turned into weeks. The booth stayed empty. The morning felt wrong. 3 weeks later, the bell above the door rang again. Grace looked up and froze. 4 men in dark suits entered first. Tall, expressionless, the kind of presence that made air tighten. Bodyguards. Behind them walked a woman in a tailored navy coat, holding a briefcase. She scanned the diner like she was searching for coordinates. "Is there a Miss Grace Miller here?" she asked. Grace's pen slipped from her hand. "Yes, that's me." The woman smiled politely. "You'll need to come with us, ma'am. Mr. Brooks requested your presence." Grace blinked. "Mr. Brooks? He's all right." The woman's lips curved. "He's waiting." Every customer turned to stare as Grace was guided outside. 4 black SUVs waited by the curb, engines humming like restrained thunder. She climbed into the back seat, hands trembling. The city blurred past, streetlights melting into streaks of gold. After 20 minutes, they turned into an area Grace had only ever seen on postcards. Iron gates, mansions like small museums, security cameras that blinked like unblinking eyes. The car stopped before an estate framed by oak trees and silence. Inside, marble floors stretched wider than her whole apartment. A grand piano rested near a fireplace big enough to house her kitchen. And there he was, sitting in a velvet armchair by the window, sunlight falling over his gray beard. The same steady posture, the same calm eyes. "Mr. Brooks," she whispered. He smiled, slow and warm. "Miss Grace." She wanted to cry and shout all at once. "You scared me half to death. You vanished." "I know," he said quietly, "but I needed to see who I could trust when I was nobody." Grace frowned, not understanding. The woman in the suit stepped forward. "Miss Miller, allow me to introduce you properly. This is Judge Elijah Brooks, retired Supreme Court Justice of Georgia, founder of the Brooks Foundation for Justice." Grace's heart skipped. She turned to Elijah, stunned. "You're a judge?" He chuckled softly. "Once, long ago, before the noise of the world drowned out what was right." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Please sit." Grace sat, still clutching her apron like armor. Elijah's eyes softened. "After my wife passed, I stopped believing in people. Spent 40 years fighting for fairness, then watched the world grow meaner. I wanted to know if kindness still existed, not in courtrooms, but in coffee cups." Her throat tightened. "You served me every day with dignity," he continued. "You gave when you had nothing to spare. That diner, that small booth, it reminded me what justice was supposed to feel like. Humanity." He reached into the table drawer and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a letter and a key. "I started a new initiative," he said. "A community center, free legal help, education, shelter for anyone starting over. I want you to manage it, Grace. You understand struggle. You understand people." She stared at the key. I'm not qualified for something like that." He smiled faintly. "You're qualified for kindness. The rest can be taught." Tears filled her eyes. "Why me?" "Because when the world saw an old man, you saw a person." Before she could answer, another woman entered. Younger, sharp-eyed, furious. "Elijah, what are you doing?" "Good morning, Cynthia," he said evenly. Grace realized this must be his daughter. Cynthia's gaze burned. "You vanish for weeks, then bring some diner waitress into our home and talk about giving her responsibilities?" "Father, she could have been anyone." Elijah leaned back. "That's the point. Anyone can choose to be decent. That's rarer than money." Cynthia turned to Grace. "What did you do to him?" Grace flinched. "Nothing. I just served him breakfast." "Exactly," Elijah said, voice low but firm. "The kind of nothing this world forgets to value." Cynthia's jaw tightened, but Elijah's bodyguards had subtly stepped closer, quiet authority surrounding him. "Mr. Brooks," Grace began softly. He raised a hand. "Elijah, please. Titles belong to the past. We build from the present." The next morning, a car waited outside Grace's apartment. Inside was a folder from Brooks' lawyers, employment contract, housing letter, donation receipt, all legal, all real. And tucked between them, a handwritten note. "The diner gave me mornings again. Now, you'll give others hope again." "Elijah," she cried for the first time in years, not from pain, but from release. At the diner, booth 3 stayed empty. But every day, new faces came through her center. Kids from rough neighborhoods, women escaping abuse, men trying to start over. And Grace never forgot the sound of that bell at 6:07 a.m. 3 months later, on a bright spring morning, Grace received a small package. Inside was Mr. Brooks' old flat cap and a photo of him standing beside the new sign. The Brooks Community House Director. Grace Miller on the back of the photo, one line. "You passed the test, Grace. Now teach the world to do the same." She held the cap against her chest, smiling through tears. The diner, the cold mornings, the coffee, all had led here. Sometimes angels do not wear wings. Sometimes they wear aprons and pour coffee into chipped cups, never knowing that small kindness was being measured, not by heaven, but by a man who once built it on earth. If you believe kindness still matters, share this story. Because one act of grace can rewrite a life or a legacy.